Hello, listeners and viewers. This is Ron Stefanski with another episode of Disrupt Ed. And we have launched and loaded our healthcare edition with my host and friend, Larry Yuhasz. Today, we're going to be talking about more massive, ginormous disruption going on in the healthcare world. And there's not an American among us that I think doesn't look at healthcare as a huge issue. How it affects them personally, how it affects their job, how it affects their insurance coverage, how it affects them when catastrophic events come into play. And today's guest, Charles Gellman from HiDO Health, is going to be talking with us about how we put analytics to use, in this case, to help care and cost regarding prescription dispensing. And so I'm going to kick it right off and turn over to Larry to talk a little bit about this disruption, how we can change the way people are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing to achieve better health outcomes and also to achieve better cost of care.
Well, I'm really excited about this particular topic because it's so visceral to so many Americans right now, especially with the aging of our population. You know, the baby boomers are almost all in retirement. There's a quartile left to get into retirement. And with that comes a massive influx of chronic care. And with chronic care comes a lot of need for treatment that requires medication adherence. And without medication adherence, there's a lot of escalation of health symptoms that cost more money for the individuals and for the healthcare system overall. So it's just a significant issue. And so, the other thing is that there are so many players that are trying to help with, polychronics, people with multiple chronic conditions by, doing improvements in care coordination, trying to, do virtual or remote diagnostics, remote patient monitoring. So there's an explosion of really neat stuff that could help this gap between the encounter with your physician and when you're at home, that's where most of what happens is, these little 15-minute encounters with the care team, and then you're on your own with your treatment protocol.
Now, it reminds me that as we started talking months ago about planning for this launch of a healthcare edition, it just reminds me how many questions come up around how we're handling our own healthcare. As I was thinking about, as I'm listening to the two of you off camera, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I've got 12 prescription medications that I'm taking right now. I need to be signing up for this. I mean, there's so many things that are make healthcare so complex and the disruption so head spinning that I think it's great to have creative minds talking us through this stuff, because not only does it produce anxiety, but when there are these opportunities, and Larry, I can't thank you enough, you've been bringing us visibility to a lot of the innovative startups that are out there. And so that's why I'm so excited to have Charles with us today. Charles, welcome to the show, and welcome to Disrupt Ed Healthcare.
Thank you so much, Ron and Larry. I appreciate it.
First of all, give us a quick snapshot of what your innovation is and where it impacts the health system.
Yeah, so what HiDO does, and HiDO stands for Health Information Data Outcomes, is the first AI-assisted robotic device that fully automates medication dispensing, remote direct observation therapy, and has a single source of truth of all the medications and the patient behaviors at home. And the impact to the healthcare system is significant because right now, truly, people don't really understand exactly what's going on at home. You have providers, you have clinicians, you have other support services that are within either the confines of the hospital or the confines of the clinic. But the majority of time, people are spending time at home. So that presents a issue. And the issue is that the majority of the information that clinicians are getting right now is from you and I, our family and friends. And that information isn't exactly entirely accurate. And so you have this miscommunication that happens. So you have providers providing information that is the best of patients' knowledge. And if that's deviating from the reality, then they make adjustments according to medications based upon that type of communication that occurs in that small moment of time. And that presents a large challenge for the entire industry.
Yeah. So if you think about like the ways that you can monitor and understand if the patient is actually adhering to their treatment protocol, which very often includes some form of medication, there's, come into the office and tell me what happened over the last 3 weeks.
Right.
Which requires the patient to kind of like reflect on or bring in notations if they're asked to do that. Or the other way is very often there's a partnership going on with the pharmacy, and the pharmacy can keep track of how often the scripts are written. Now the pharmacy might not know if the patients are actually taking the pills, but they can tell how often they do the scripts. And, you've heard all the stories about, elderly folks on a budget or Social Security, and they do pill splitting and all that kind of stuff. And so adherence, it's really hard to know that. And then there's also, well, we're going to send someone. We're going to, a home care aide is going to come in, and they're going to actually physically look at your bottles. They're going to look at how you set up your pills. Like most people set up little cups, and they set their pills out in the morning or in the afternoon, or they have those little plastic things that are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? And they see, are you doing it? And they show, are they capable of doing it? And then they go, oh, wow, you look good. And they walk away, but they still don't know, are they actually doing it? And so now there's this, next generation of actually monitoring the dispensing. And that kind of seems like where you are in the evolution. So could you kind of highlight how what you do differs from what other practices are?
Yeah, so you alluded to what the current standard is. So
there it is.
Okay.
Yes, we have them here. We've studied them very closely.
I have the dark purple one. Yes.
Yeah. So I'd say the majority of the folks that are probably watching this have some semblance or are using that. Now, what's a little bit unique and different about what we've done is we actually never intended to go down this rabbit hole. And what we did is, and my background, just kind of bring you back, is in data science. So I was looking for data to actually understand and track people's behaviors, so then we can get the best patient outcomes and improve them within the hospital or the health system. And once we started looking at the marketplace, we started to recognize that there was major gaps within the current type of methodology or the engineering of the devices. And those gaps, perhaps, they filled a particular solution. So this one, you can get your medications, but now you're dependent upon the patients to fill each one of the medications. They have to put the right medications in the right slot, the right dosage, remember to take it. So once you start actually unpacking the entire market, you start to recognize that there's so many different gaps. And what we've had to do is rethink the entire methodology, and you got to make things easy for people. You got to make them less challenging than filling up this. So what we've done is we've automated the entire process, soup to nuts. So this is a pill bottle that we use. Within each pill bottle, you have an embedded RFID chip. And what that does is it auto-recognizes medication, dosage, frequency, and pill count. So similar to like a Keurig coffee machine or a ring-like device, what you do is you put this within the device. It auto-recognizes all that information, so the patient doesn't have to do anything anymore. Then when you walk up to the device, you can either use Face ID or you put a passcode, depending upon the preference of the individual. And then you walk up, dispenses the medications, you take the medications. So I have one preloaded right here. And then a video recording is taken on the back end, and that's it. So the patient experience is less than what it would be with the current methodology. And
using a regular dispenser. That's what's so amazing about this. And I think for our listening and viewing audience, we're here with Charles Gellman from HiDO Health and Larry Yuhasz, my friend and co-host on our Health Care Disrupt Ed edition. And what's so fascinating about this is how AI is being used in such a positive way. I think AI is on the minds of everyone for all these ominous things that people are portending are going to happen. But here, this application is actually making something that's a little complex and a little bit difficult for anyone with cognitive impairments or physical impairments. And you've just made it, super easy. And AI is not an encumbrance here or something to fear, but it's created a huge opportunity to make things better for patients.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, you hear a lot of AI in the news, good and bad, and there's a range depending upon the applicability of, how people are leveraging it. But in this particular instance, what we study is we study patient behaviors to improve their outcomes. So this particular robotic device is there to improve people's health. And most folks, they're looking to either stabilize their disease state or actually get better in time. But in order to do that, they need some additional assistance. So that's what the HiDO device does, is provide a little bit of a helping hand at home, but at a fraction of the cost. And especially with the labor markets being exceptionally tight, what this can do is can provide a low-cost option for the folks that don't have the means to spend $2,000 to $10,000 a month on having a person physically go to the home.
Can you give us a sense of, we talked earlier about polychronics, and so it's very common for someone to be on blood pressure medication, blood thinners. They might even be taking a whole regimen of personal supplements, right, that they feel that they need to take. Some might be, sanctioned by the physician, some might not. And so how many different pills can you handle in your device for polychronics?
Now, before you answer that question, I'm the English major in the room that's not the healthcare guy. So, Larry, what do you mean by polychronics? Why don't you explain?
Polychronics are people who have multiple health conditions at the same time. So,
Okay.
common one would be a person is obese, they have heart disease, they have high blood pressure, they might
They have
also have diabetes,
Right. Gotcha.
etc. And there's many, many, many people now across the country that have multiple diseases or are called polychronics.
Okay. Well, let's go down that road. Let's go down the road of cardiovascular disease, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and what we focus on are the medications that keep you out of the hospital and out of the emergency room. And there's many other medications that people take because maybe it makes them feel better, or maybe they've been told in the past that taking these supplements or vitamins or other particular type of regimens will help them. But that is not the focus of HiDO. HiDO's focus is to ensure that you're taking the have to have medications. There's have to have, need to have, and nice to haves. So our have to haves are there's medications that you can take for your heart that are actually, they'll do a thing called heart remodeling. So you can actually improve the function of your heart over time if you take the medications, which is fantastic. So
life-changing, really.
It is life-changing. So we were partnering up with a Medicare Advantage plan in Northern California. And this was folks that have cardiovascular disease. They have heart failure. So these are the most challenging of the bunch. And by them taking the medications, and we hold 7 different slots, and these hold up to 90 days of medications, we're able to reduce hospitalizations by 80% and reduce cost of care by 67%. And these
Hold on, you got to repeat those numbers, man. That's pretty solid.
Yeah. So this is a Medicare Advantage plan out of Northern California in congestive heart failure patients. So reduction of 80% hospitalization and a 67% cost of care. So this
Cost
is not
of care. That's incredible.
So you think about the pendulum swinging, and these people, the only intervention that they had was a little bit of assistance at home at a fraction of the cost. So think proactively treating people with the have to have medications, controlling them on their prescribing regimen, and then you can actually see people's behaviors. And if their behaviors deviate, somebody can call them because they know what's going on at home for the first time ever. And that's what the game-changing technology is with HiDO. It's not just the device, it's not just the support, but it's knowing what's going on. And the home is no longer a black hole. You actually know what's going on, and so we can help support people remotely.
This is a fascinating aspect of it for me because there's so many challenges with care coordination in our fragmented healthcare system. There's a few really exceptional health systems out there that are like closed systems where the specialists, the primary care physicians, the nurse practitioners, the care managers are all on the same record. They collaborate, and the patient feels embraced by the whole team. But the vast majority of the U.S. population has their primary care physician over here, the specialists over there, and, the pharmacy, and it's all over the place, right? So in that context, there's output that is providing insight into whether there's adherence or not happening with this particular patient. So that data could help a home care aide, it could help a care coordinator, it could help a health plan, it could help a pharmacy doing a clinical trial. So how many different players, use this data?
Yeah, I think when you start really unpacking what the data is saying and what the use cases could be, the potential is far reaching, because this is a unique data set that doesn't currently exist in the marketplace for people to access. And by having this unique data set, you can impact people in so many different ways. And you mentioned it, Larry, from clinical trials and advancing drug development to having real world data and real world evidence, all the way to the health plan side where they can actually deviate and do clinical intervention for patients so they can get better patient outcomes. So depending upon what your use case is and what you're trying to accomplish, I think that this could be far reaching and impact many millions of people. And that's what's so exciting.
Now, Charles, when you talk about data, this whole project started out in a data exercise with the National Health Institute and Stanford. Can you tell us more about that? You were talking a little bit about that off camera, but I think it's really fascinating where all this information started and what your first thesis was and how it adapted through the use of this data.
Yeah, so my our first initial research and our first NIH-funded studies, we collaborated with Stanford. So that was with folks that were studying antiretroviral medications and looking at adherence thresholds. And one of the secondary endpoints, which was pretty fascinating, is that what we found was that their people's A1Cs, which are, they're diabetic patients, and you're looking at the blood sugar levels drop, was a byproduct of people taking their other medications. So it speaks to the point that when you're studying specific areas, you don't know exactly what's going to happen until you're in the weeds. And what was very interesting is that once you started looking at one particular area, you had a cascading impact on people's health. And you could start seeing all the blood work get better over time. And these were the same patients treated by the same physicians taking the exact same medications, but were altering their life. And that's what's so exciting with this type of research.
Right. The impact, the patient impact is just so extraordinary when you think about it. And it speaks to the fact that, people are getting all these medications. They can't keep them straight. They don't know how they work. And this is kind of making all of that easier. And I guess my fascination with it, Larry, is how it impacts the patient themselves. You guys have worked with, health providers and health plans and stuff, but I'm thinking about it from the standpoint of me as a patient. It's just going to make my life easier, and I'm going to feel better because I'm spending less money on my care, and I'm also, wow, these medications are really fully impacting me in a positive way, right?
So the anything that can be done to eliminate the stress and the potential cognitive breakdowns with adherence is a huge gain, not only for the patient, but also for their care providers. My own parents are aging, they have multiple issues, and my mother is the one who primarily looks over and makes sure certain things are occurring. So eliminating the stress of the care team. And then there is also cases where hospital at home is now becoming a huge trend. And so there's going to be care aides and home health aides and more in the home where this could be a useful tool to help with their productivity.
Right. And at the same time, what I keep coming back to is the 67% number, 67% savings on cost. Every time, Larry, it's, what's interesting to me is every time we've brought a guest on here, we've kind of come to the conclusion over time that there are so many, pricing issues affecting the increases in healthcare that you kind of need something this significant to start taking some of the cost out of this, because our current system, we all know, is not sustainable. And this is a measurable, significant way to do that, it seems to me.
No, I would totally agree with you, Ron, that whether it's a value-based care program that's administered by, Medicare Advantage, which, Charles had mentioned earlier, or it could be a regional health plan that's trying to, improve costs and outcomes for let's say heart disease or diabetes treatment, which are very common nowadays, any data source that can show it's moving the needle on cost and helping also alleviate some of the productivity challenges of frontline healthcare workers can be very, very effective. Are you finding that in some of your use cases, that it's a dual benefit both for the patient and for the healthcare team itself?
Yeah, I mean, our entire focus is impacting patients' lives. So by impacting people's lives and improving them, the byproduct is that it's a win-win for everyone. And what I mean by that is that these folks are already getting the medications in the first place, but if they're not being controlled on the specific regimens, it's challenging for providers to understand whether or not they titrate up or titrate down or change medications when you're looking at lab results. So this type of transparency impacts patients' lives because they can actually take less medications, as crazy as that sounds. So if you're taking the correct medications, you can actually start de-escalating potentially with specific disease states other medications. So then you have less side effects and adverse events and people feel better. And then they take their medications even more regimented than before. So it's very exciting to see the potential of this technology come to life and the impact on the patients.
Fantastic. Listen, Charles, as we wrap this, any last words for us in our conversation here that you want to share with our listening and viewing audience?
Yeah, I mean, we're very excited with the HiDO technology. And if you are with a health plan or a home care operator or a pharmaceutical company looking for new innovative technology that can impact patients and bring unique data sets and alter the potential cost of care for these patients, we'd be more than happy to chat about discussions about pushing that technology out.
Fantastic. Larry, any last thoughts before we wrap this episode?
I have one future-reaching question. So your type of technology for medication dispensing is only one of many interventions that are coming to the patient's home. So like all sorts of remote patient monitoring, heart monitors, step on the scale, measure your blood, etc. Do you believe that there's going to be some convergence of these technologies at some place where you go to your station, your patient station, and you plug in and you step on the scale and then you get your drugs dispensed and then you measure your glucose, so that it also helps the fragmentation of devices that are coming into the patient's home?
So Larry, you mentioned something that's very interesting. There's a thing called primary endpoints and secondary endpoints and then final outcomes. So primary inputs or endpoints are actually what you eat, what your exercise looks like, medications you take. Second is, okay, we're going to look at your heart. So we're going to look at heart rate variability, or we're going to look at blood pressure, or we're going to look at your lab work or your weight. Now, the precursor to that is what you're eating, how you're exercising, what medications you're taking. So we can control those, then everything else ends up to be pretty much linear stabilization. So if people have diabetes and they're looking at their blood sugar levels, but they're actually taking their medications, whether it be their metformin or Jardiance or whatever it might be, to control those, then they're stabilized, and you can see that over time. So to your point, I believe, and what we've already seen is that by having a HiDO device in the home and by seeing what the patient's doing and controlling those lab works, those secondary endpoints or those other type of remote patient monitoring devices are just basically reporting a consistent level. And then if you want to have deviations in that, then you got to change one of those primary inputs. And then the entire ecosystem will have a loop. So you can actually see what's going on and what type of decisions you need to make to alter a patient's outcomes.
To our listening and viewing audience, this has been Disrupt Ed, the healthcare edition. It's brought to you because of all your feedback. As we've engaged this community, you've been asking about the disruption that's happening within healthcare. And that's why we launched this series and why we're really happy to have Charles join us today, because as you can see, the oncoming technologies using AI, using advanced techniques are really, really going to create some stunning differences in improving healthcare outcomes, but also, as importantly, issuing interventions that can help us reduce the cost of care. So thank you both, gentlemen. For those of you listening and viewing us, join our podcast, join our newsletter, and join us for another episode of Disrupt Ed. Thanks so much.